We have a public hearing that was scheduled for tonight. My understanding that they asked for an extension.
They granted an extension of 65 days and asked to delay the opening of the hearing until next month.
Any motion? Delay the hearing until next month.
Make that motion. This, just for record, this is for the 2022-2263.
Yes.
This is,
Make a motion to delay the next one.
Motion, we have a second.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. So our regular meeting, we'll start with roll call on my left. Call out your name.
Sean Peterson.
We all ready. Brady Stillwell.
Tom Sinkowitz.
Call the meeting to order. Do we have any additions or corrections to the agenda?
we have that.
First order of business, we done minutes of the meeting of 1/18/22.
I think that should be the meeting minutes of February 15th. Correction to that.
I don't think we had a meeting in February, did we?
Oh, meeting minutes
You got
of
it.
February
That's right.
15th, so I think we had a,
We didn't have it in January, yes.
didn't have one in January. Make a motion, the meeting minutes for February 15th, 2022 be approved as mailed.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Unfinished old business, continuation of Joshua Deloge requesting permission to construct a gravel access road for hunting and wood cutting on property located at 0 Starkweather Road, Assessors Map 24, Block 57, Lot 28.
Make a motion.
Speak for that.
This is tabled until next month.
Until next month.
Yes.
Make a motion, 2022-2263 be tabled till next month as requested.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Continuation of Lee Parker, Z 2022-2268, requesting approval to construct a single-family residence within an upland review area at a property located on Jackson Road, Assessors Map 7, Lot 53A, Lot 40C.
Good evening, for the record, my name is Paul Archer, representing the Parkers. This is part of a subdivision that was before this board back in 1997, that this lot was approved back then for the site development plan. And basically what we're doing is coming up to snuff with it here. And back when it was, did they have a copy of the 97?
There's one at the top.
That, here, the subdivision in the wetlands crossing that was permitted back in 1997 for Eric Lato. Now, what's that? Nope. And so the wetland crossing has been installed. So the only thing that we're looking now to do is develop the lot with the residential home and the septic system on. The residential home, the septic system, and I would say 90% of the driveway is outside of your purview. So if you look on the plan here, you can see that we've gone ahead and we have delineated the 100-foot upland review line here. in which you can see that most of, all the development here, the upper review line, is outside of your purview. So the only small portion is, we got, most of this driveway is in, and we have a small thing just to finish and grade it. So basically, that's what we're looking for, is permission to grade the driveway and a small amount of grading inside the upland review area. We're planning nothing to do inside the wetlands. That was, this is the old one that was approved back in '97 here that showed the wetlands crossing and, got here. Now, this one has expired.
Yeah.
The wetlands as delineated on there, redelineated in the field by Joseph Thoreau. We had updated soil testing, and the soil testing is 100% grade.
Any other questions? Any discussion?
I got one. Power trenches. Are we going to dig through the wetlands, put power trenches in, or are we doing pools?
I believe it's going to be underground, because all the houses there are underground now.
So you'll be disturbing all the wetlands going through? Yeah.
No, the power is already coming, the power already comes up the road to this house.
Yep.
And I don't know if they brought the power over here or if the transformer is over here. So part of that would be we would have to put the trenches in the ground.
You'd have excavation in the wetlands again.
Power comes to the house here now. That's an existing house. Here, that was Eric's house that he lived there.
So none of this is in?
I don't know. I would highly doubt that any of this is in it. If I believe it's probably up to there. I don't believe they would have ran it over to the proposed lot until it was time to run.
So it was permitted way back when, as long as it's expired, right?
Yes, this is from 99.
97, so that's long since expired, so as was indicated, if power's got to go underground, that's new disturbance in the wetland area.
Well, they'd be running it through the driveway that's already existing. So they wouldn't be disturbing any more wetlands.
Either driveway or off the side.
I believe it would go in the driveway. And I believe it would go above the pipe, so you wouldn't be actually digging in the wetlands.
How deep does it have to be in the ground?
It doesn't, it just has so many feet of cover.
Correct.
If you looked at,
What's this here?
yeah, that's just the line there. It shows that that's more.
That's the electricity in the pole line right there.
Yeah.
That's your proposed route on the edge of the driveway.
That's the proposed route as of now.
Want to modify the plan and put it in the driveway?
We could, if you made that a condition of approval, yes, we would have no problem doing that.
Just still got to dig up the driveway. Just go through the wetland.
driveway, if it's in here, would be. Any other comments or discussion? Entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that this be tabled and request revised plans that shows exactly what's going to happen with the trenching for the power line, for the power.
Motion made, do I have a second?
Second it.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? Motion carries. Yes. Updated plans.
Sure.
Next item Z 2022-2282, continuation of United Ag and Turf Northeast requesting permission to construct a 7,708 square foot addition, pavement modifications, drainage improvements totaling .80 acres, disturbance on property located at 20 Excalibur Road, Excalibur Boulevard, excuse me. Assessors map 17, block 11, lot I-32.
You've all seen this, better place to put it, on this board, the old right there. People might want to see this, so I want to head down this side. Take it down there? My name is Tim Kuhn, I'm a professional engineer with J.R. Rousseau and Associates, here tonight representing United Ag and Turf Northeast, along with Dave Hammond, who's with United Ag and Turf. We are looking to get a permit for work in the upland review area at 20 Excalibur Boulevard, this building, which is upside down. Shows the property at 20 Excalibur Boulevard. This is the former Motorsports Nation. The property is about 6.68 acres on commercial. It's abutted to the south, this being south on the left-hand side of the page by Wendy's and the Gulf Station, West Route 95, along the west and the north. And then there's appears to be open space associated with Lathrop Brook off to the east. There's an existing building shown in the darker brown here. It's about 18,600 square feet. And the majority of the parking, I don't know if you're familiar with the site, I went out there to look at it, already exists. There's a lot of paving out there that was constructed along with the building in 2005. This is served by public water, sewer, natural gas, and an on-site stormwater management system. That system includes a series of catch basins in these parking areas. Some of the catch basins discharge to an existing stormwater basin down here in the southeast corner of the property. However, many of them simply discharge directly to subsurface galleries where it's infiltrated back into the ground. These galleries do have an overflow system to either take it down to the basin or to a little depression out in the back, but the majority of the runoff is infiltrated at this site currently. Lathrop Brook is shown in blue here off to the east. The western bank of the brook, this is actually the western bank of the brook. We did survey this, and we're using it to represent the link to the wetlands being the bank there, and used it to establish the 100-foot upland review area, which is designated by this purple magenta line. There are no actual wetlands on site. What is being proposed is a 7,780 square foot building addition, which is shown by the the tanner color here, which will be constructed in 2 phases. So we're getting both phases approved at this time. Other than the removal of a landscape island, the majority of this area is currently paved. So there will be some reconfiguration of the edge of parking down to the south, but the majority of the work is all in this area just south of the building. And in total, we're only going to be adding, I think, a little over 3,000 square feet of additional impervious area. The parking will remain out in front of the buildings. These existing lots will be used. This hatch here designates areas which will be used for display. This lot will be used for unloading, loading, and crate storage. And again, the areas up in front of the building will also be used for display of their product. The project will include a new infiltration basin, which is located off to the southeast of the development area. We will be collecting the runoff from our development area and utilizing this new basin for treatment and groundwater recharge for that runoff. In addition, we will be retrofitting all of the existing catch basins at the site with catch basin inserts, filter bags, which include an oil absorbent material. This will provide treatment, pre-treatment, at this site where essentially there was no pre-treatment before. So that would be a benefit of this development. There is no direct wetland disturbance, as I mentioned. There's approximately 8/10 of an acre of work within the upland review area. We will be installing your standard perimeter sediment barriers. As I mentioned, we're going to be putting the filter bags on the catch basins, and these erosion control measures will be implemented during construction to protect from any sedimentation to the downgrading wetlands. We have received some comments from both Ryan and the town engineer, which were previously addressed and are addressed in the plan sets that were submitted. And we did recently receive some other comments, some follow-up comments from the town engineer, which I just had the opportunity to address yesterday. I did talk with the town engineer about them. This particular plan in front of you does address all of his additional comments. Request that the top of the berm to our basin that we are constructing be increased from 4 feet wide to 8 feet wide. And by doing this, it just pushes our grade 4 feet closer to our property line and to Lathrop Road. However, still the closest part of any grade to the brook is over 40 feet. And the majority of it is well over 60 feet. So the other comments were fairly minor, have been addressed. I have not seen any response from him, but I do believe that Ryan spoke with him and that he is satisfied with that, or what was done to address his comments. So we are hoping that you will be able to approve this application tonight. And we would like you to be happy with a condition of approval requiring that we address the town engineer's comments to his satisfaction, if that would make you more comfortable approving it tonight without actually having something wrong. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
We have the design specifications for the additional impervious surface and how you arrived at the size of the sediment basin.
Yes, we have a drainage report was submitted, which took into account all the pre-developments and the post-development, impervious cover and conditions, and all that was used to determine the required water quality volumes and the required recharge volumes in accordance with the kinetic water quality standards. And that was used to size the basin, and all of that was part of the drainage report, which has been reviewed and approved by the town engineer.
What other issues are is the engineer concerned about?
There are some minor things the engineer might require from a planning and zoning perspective, as far as the drainage goes, but it won't impact this permit. He is satisfied from a wetlands perspective, as am I.
Where is your, you have A-bell, silt fence?
Yes, and it actually, it doesn't show on this exhibit plan. However, it does show on the plan sets that were submitted, and it's essentially we're bringing the down gradient area of disturbance, which is, but as I mentioned, it essentially runs from the corner of the building here to the edge of the parking there. So it'll be on the down gradient side. And all of the existing and the proposed catch basins will receive the filter inserts during construction. Those will actually be permanent, the catch basin inserts.
Do you have a maintenance plan for that?
Yes, there's the maintenance plan, the maintenance schedule is on the detail sheet in the plan set, which includes the maintenance for those.
Anybody else have any questions or discussion?
Is that something we should be looking at?
What's that?
Full set of plans.
You know, the drainage, the maintenance, all that?
It's typically handled by planning and zoning, so this is one for a special permit. And anything that might be absent will be addressed at planning and zoning. But we do have a maintenance schedule, we have the drainage report, the engineer has reviewed all the things.
Any other discussion? Somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve Z 2022-2282.
Second?
I'll second it.
Motion been made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Next item Z, 2022-2303 of Scanell Properties. Number 639 LLC, CO Daniel, that's a mouthful. Madrigal, requesting permission to construct 1 million square foot warehouse with 975 parking spaces, associated drives, parking areas, drainage, etc. on property at 91 through 105, 107, 113, and 143 through 151 Plainfield Pike Road.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Evan Seaman. I'm a lawyer at Robinson Cole in Hartford. I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant, Scanell Properties number 639 LLC. And I wanted to first introduce our team members that we have with us this evening. First, on behalf of Skinnell Properties, we have Leo Layton. Our civil engineer for this project is Matt Burton from BL Companies. And last is Dean Gustafson, our wetland scientist from All Points Technology Corporation. So before I hand it over to Matt and Dean to go through their PowerPoint presentation, I did want to just provide a quick overview of the site and the project. So this is, the site is actually 4 separate parcels along Plainfield Pike Road with addresses of 91-105, 107, 113, and 143-151 Plainfield Pike Road. Together, they combine to create about 137 acres of property. And much of the property is undeveloped, although there are parts of it that are developed in use. The largest parcel, which is 143-151 Plainfield Pike Road, has an ongoing mining and quarry operation, and the northwestern parcel, which is 91-105, has a commercial building on it. So the surrounding uses and zones, it's a mix. It's a mix of industrial, commercial, and residential. And this really is an ideal location for this project, which is a 1 million square foot warehouse with associated parking and drive aisles. And the reason I say that is because it's located just south of Plainfield Pike Road in the central part of town and close to the I-395 corridor. So I wanted to just briefly get into some of the wetlands resources, and I won't get into too much detail because our wetland scientists will do that, but there are wetlands on the site and primarily located on the edges of the western, southern, and eastern portions of the property. There is also upland review area, and out of the 137 acres on site, about 25 acres are in uplands, which is about 18% of the site. So the project, the design has been really carefully developed to avoid direct impact to wetlands. There will be no direct impact to wetlands. There will, however, be minimal impact to uplands. About 2.83 acres of the 25 acres of uplands, or 11%, will be altered. But this really is, and you'll hear more from our wetland scientists, this really is the most prudent and feasible alternative to avoid direct impact to wetlands while minimizing alteration of upland review area. And the last piece that I just wanted to mention before handing it over is we've also submitted a wetlands mitigation plan, and under that plan there will be enhancements to select wetlands areas and also upland review areas. About 2.25 acres will be enhanced, and that will be done primarily through removal of invasive species vegetation and replanting with native vegetation, and that will enhance protection of water quality and also provide additional wildlife habitat. So with that brief introduction, I'm going to hand it over now to our civil engineer.
Good evening, everybody. For the record, my name is Matthew Bruton. I'm an engineer with BL Companies, headquartered at 355 Research Parkway in Marion, Connecticut. I'm going to just control the screen, so I apologize for my weird sitting. So as Evan mentioned, what I have up on the screen here now is a historical map, just a Google Earth map from 2006. So if you can see my mouse in general, a lot we're speaking about goes from left to right, kind of where my hand is moving right now. Plainfield Pike is in yellow on the left-hand side of the screen, and then some of the surrounding streets, Colonial Drive down here, Dow Road to the south, which is technically the right-hand side of the page. The next slide that we'll see, it's just a current aerial for 2020. I'll just toggle back and forth so you can see. In general, the majority of the development, as you would just expect, is along Plainfield Pike, with the solar field development to the west, and then some businesses along the frontage of Plainfield Pike. So as Ed mentioned, this is an existing survey showing the overall boundaries. Again, Plainfield Pike to the left-hand side on the screen, and Colonial Drive, just for point of reference, towards the bottom right-hand corner. Again, as Ed mentioned, kind of combining the several parcels to get to the 137 acreage with main access from Plainfield Pike for our frontage. Just to give you guys a sense of, if you haven't been out there on the property, topography kind of varies. So along the road, frontage of Plainfield Pike kind of goes anywhere from 290 to 315 as it climbs up as you head east. And the site as well climbs from the road up to the center of the property, where we have a kind of elevation of around 360 feet, which is right in the middle. When I pass it to Dean next, he'll walk you through where the wetlands are located on the property, and you can see that obviously will match with the topography that we have going. And then we'll come back and I'll walk you through the proposed site plan.
That black remote is a plan.
Oh.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Good evening, folks. Before I start my discussion, I'll just briefly summarize my qualifications. My name is Dean Gustafson. I'm a senior wetland scientist, professional soil scientist with All Points Technology, Waterford, Connecticut. I've been a wetland consultant in Connecticut for going on 34 years now. I maintain registrations with the Society of Soil Scientists of Southern New England, the Connecticut Association of Massachusetts Wetland Scientists, and the Association of Massachusetts Wetland Scientists. And also, like yourself, I volunteer my time on the Lebanon Inland Wetland Commission, where I've been a member for over 25 years. So I commend you all for your dedication and time to protect wetland resources in the town of Plainfield. This graphic shows the results of our wetland investigation from November of 2021. This investigation is relatively consistent with previous delineations on this property that were likely associated with the ongoing mining and gravel operations. So on this graphic, the wetlands are kind of shown in this light green highlighted areas, and then the 100-foot upland review area is shown by this darker green line. In total, we identified 6 wetland resources, primarily located along the eastern side of the property, as well as the southern and western sides. For descriptive purposes, we've numbered all the wetland systems, and as you'll note, this wetland system on the eastern side is the largest wetland system on the property. It consists of forested swamp habitat, and forms the headwaters for Fry Brook. Within the interior of this wetland system, there is a perennial stream. There's an existing bridge crossing where the gap exists between this wetland one area, and then the stream continues and then heads into a culvert underneath Plainfield Pike. The other surrounding wetland systems, 2, 3, 4, are located along the southern side of the property. And then the western side of the property, there's a small little isolated wetland system, wetland 5. And then there's a small perennial stream system right in the very far southeastern corner, identified as wetland 7. All of these wetland systems in this part of the property all generally drain to the west and serve as kind of headwaters to Lathrop Brook, located right in the bottom left corner of this graphic. In addition to performing the delineation of wetland resources on the site, we recently conducted a survey of those areas to determine if there were any vernal pool habitats. We identified 6 vernal pools, and those are identified by, it's a little tough to see on this graphic, but they're identified by this blue crosshatched area. There's 2, the larger feature is associated with a historic farm pond, a smaller feature right next to it. There's another one in this area, another one in this area, and then two in kind of the southwestern part of the property. One thing to note about this larger area of the farm pond, although we did see some evidence of breeding, habitat consists of historic farm pond. We weren't able to conclusively determine whether it does or not, but it appears that it would sustain fish population. And if it does, it would discount that as a vernal pool area. One thing to note, even if there are some breeding activity occurring within that, there would be a high level of predation, just because of the open water habitat nature of that feature. And so it wouldn't necessarily support a productive population of breeding by obligate vernal pool species. For all the vernal pools that we did survey, we found the common species, common vernal pool species, wood frog, as well as spotted salamander. So there weren't any rare species or unique species associated with those. They're all fairly common for vernal pool habitats. And with that, now that you kind of understand what the wetlands are on the property and where they are, I'll hand it back to the map to kind of discuss the proposed development activities.
Thanks, Dan. So the next slide we have here is rotated again, so Plainfield Pike is to the left-hand side, and then Colonial Drive in the lower right-hand corner, just for orientation. So the proposed conditions, we're proposing a 1 million square foot warehouse, which is the orange rectangle in the center of the parcel. As mentioned when read to the record, 975 car parking spaces. The majority are placed in the front of the building, between the building and Plainfield Pike, but there's also a parking field towards the rear of the building as well. The goal being able to split the building potentially from 1 to 2 tenants to attract them to the property. In addition to that, there's 200 dock doors. Those are spread out on 2 sides. One on this side, and then again one on the other side of the building. And then we also have 186 trailer storage spaces. So those are just parking spaces across the drive aisles here and here. Access to the property is proposed to come off of Plainfield Pike. We do show 2 locations, one here and then one further up. This will allow full circulation for potential tenants and for emergency vehicles. Since this is Route 14A, it does require a DOT encroachment permit, and based on the size of this development, it is also considered a major traffic generator by OSTA, so we would need to go through that OSTA process as well. That is ongoing as we're running through this local permitting process with you. So as mentioned by Dean and Evan, we don't have any direct wetland impacts. We're only in the upland review area. But as part of this development, obviously we're increasing impervious area from the areas that you saw, which is mostly forested. So we are increasing impervious areas. We are providing a stormwater management system to accommodate for that increase. What the guidelines that we follow when developing this plan is the 2004 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual, and also the 2002 Erosion and Sediment Control Guidelines. So in a nutshell, the goal of that 2004 Stormwater Quality Manual is to maintain drainage patterns, provide 80% TSS, which is total suspended solids reduction, and then a pre versus post peak flow mitigation. This plan that we're have submitted and we're talking about now hits all of those marks. How we're doing that is a stormwater management system that's catch basins with deep sumps and hoods, hydrodynamic separators, and detention basins both above ground and below ground. So that whole system we call the treatment train provides mitigation for the peak flow off the property, so we're not flooding out a neighbor, flooding out a road, or drying out or flooding a wetland. It does provide a clean discharge, that 80% TSS that I mentioned before. So there's a variety of those devices spread around parking lot. Obviously, the catch basins with the salts and hoods are within the parking lot. And then we have subsurface areas. You can see this kind of darker black rectangle in some places underneath the parking lot. And we also have an above ground basin as well along Plainfield Pike Road. Another part of the application and plan set that was submitted was erosion and sanitation control. We follow the 2002 guidelines in regards to this. Obviously, the goal is to be able to protect abutters, public streets, town roads, and more importantly, any resources. So the plans that we do provide show measures that need to be put in place prior to earthwork operations, and we typically like to keep those in place until the site is stabilized, and by stabilized I mean grass growth, pavement, building, to make sure that erosion won't occur. So devices that we do show include construction entrances, silt fence, silt sacks, soil stockpile areas, erosion control blankets, diversion swales, temporary sediment traps. So those all would be under control by the contractor throughout construction and should remain in place until, again, the site is stabilized. And just to add to this, the size of this development does require CTD approval because of the area of land clearing. We are required to do a general discharge permit for construction activities. So if we're successful with getting your approval here, we would also have to go to them for a review of our plans prior to commencement of construction. In addition to this, we do provide a photometric plan, which I know is normally more on the P&Z side, but I wanted to point out to you guys as well. We are providing site lighting, obviously for safety and security of potential tenants at this property. We are proposing LED full cutoff, dark sky compliant fixtures. Obviously, just for the operation, the goal is to have no light trespass past the property line into the adjacent occupied properties. I think, Dean, I will pass it back to you.
Thank you, Don. So what I'll talk about now is kind of summarizing what the regulated activities are and really the main intent why we're here tonight before this commission seeking your approval. As you've heard several times already, even though it's a large development, we've been able to successfully position the building and access drives to avoid any direct wetland impacts. And we did look at some various alternative layouts, positioning of the building, reorientation, but the surrounding wetland systems really kind of drive the design of this project. With the large wetland system, Wetland 1, which being associated with the perennial stream system, considered headwaters to Fry Brook, and it contains at least some level of unique aquatic habitat with some vernal pool. Compared to some of the other wetlands on this property, it services the highest level of functional values. So we were looking at trying to avoid any wetland impacts, but certainly avoiding any wetland impacts along Wetland 1. So that was a major design constraint. Some of the early designs didn't involve extensive use of retaining walls. They used graded slopes. Those resulted in a certain level of direct wetland impact and extensive areas of activity within the upland review area, multiple times of what we're proposing with our preferred alternative. And so we consider this proposal the most prudent feasible alternative. It avoids direct wetland impact, and through a significant investment, the applicant is going to be using extensive areas of retaining wall to try and minimize the spread of the development. And that goes a long ways to not only avoiding any direct wetland impacts, but also minimizing the amount of activity within the 100-foot upland review area. We've been able to limit that to 2.83 acres. acres, which only represents 11% of the total upland review area on the subject property. The other thing to point out is that in addition to, having no impact to a significant portion of the site along the eastern side, there is a significant block of habitat in the southern portion of the subject property. Contains both various wetland areas as well as mature terrestrial forested upland habitat supporting it. So that complex of habitats is fairly high value with respect to the subject property. And so having the building in this location that contains some of the existing mining operation that's been cleared and disturbed, it minimizes impact to some of the higher quality habitat, including wetlands on the subject property. But, at the end of the day, we're unable to avoid any activity within the 100-foot upland review area based on the building program needs and the orientation of the wetlands on the subject property. Most of the upland review area activities associated with wetland 1 and then to a lesser degree 4 and 5. And so we targeted wetland 1 in proximate areas, seeing it's providing the highest level of service to the functional values on the subject property for some mitigation. And what we're proposing is enhancements to a portion within actually wetland 1 and then within some of the upland review areas highlighted in green for enhancements. And those enhancements would consist primarily of removing some invasive shrub species which dominate the understory in both those habitats, multiflora rose, Japanese barberry, etc. They're a dominant cover type within the shrub layer, and that's suppressing wildlife utilization within those habitats. So by removing those invasives and then replanting with select native trees, shrubs, and herbaceous species, will enhance the habitat value of those areas and provide appropriate level of compensatory mitigation for our limited activities within the upland review area. So we feel that it's an appropriate level of mitigation to compensate for the project's impacts and will overall provide a benefit to the wetland resource area, particularly wetland 1, which is the highest level of service to functions and values. That's just one component of the wetland mitigation plan. It's the most important one, but we're also providing monitoring during constructions through a wetland protection plan. Because the project involves some activity in fairly close proximity to wetlands, we've employed this on other Skinell projects throughout the state. Where we employ a wetland protection program, we assign a project wetland scientist to work with the contractor, first attend a pre-construction meeting with them, go over the sensitive nature of the subject property, the construction site, proximity to wetland resources, special aquatic habitats like vernal pools, and they need to be diligent about construction activities, particularly installation and maintenance of erosion controls throughout the course of construction. We'll provide periodic inspection of the project site, ensure the E&S controls are installed properly, and then monitored throughout the duration of the construction project. It places a little more stress on the contractor, that they know that there's another set of eyes on the project, just to make sure that the wetlands are being protected and there just isn't any inadvertent release of sediment or impacts to wetland areas throughout the course of the construction. So we think that in combination with some of the other measures, the phased erosion sanitation control plan, as well as the stormwater management system, which is using the latest technologies for appropriate treatment, both volume and quality of stormwater, that overall the project provides and is adequately protective of the interests of your wetland regulations, and therefore would not result in likely adverse impact to wetland areas. And I think with that, we'll hand it back over to Evan to wrap up our presentation.
Thanks, Dean. So back to me, just for a quick summary. So this property is zoned in the industrial district, proposes the redevelopment of an underutilized site. No direct or likely adverse impact to wetlands, minimal impact to the upland review area, comprehensive erosion and sedimentation controls, improvements to the stormwater management plan, and a comprehensive wetlands mitigation plan, which Dean just discussed. And finally, protective of wetland regulation interests. As Dean mentioned, other alternatives were considered, and this is the alternative. This is the proposal which will avoid direct impacts to the wetlands while minimizing any alteration to the upland review area. So with that, we'd like to thank you for your time this evening. We're happy to answer any questions that you have and would respectfully request that you vote favorably on this application this evening. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
Is this a significant impact to wetlands?
The commission has not so far determined that, and as there is, typically the commission is not required to slip in impact.
The enhancements that you described, will that work be done in a wetland?
Part of the enhancement will include a portion of wetland 1. That work will all be done by hand. They'll essentially, for the invasive shrubs, they'll be hand cut and then hand applied with either a low volume sprayer or hand applicator with an appropriate herbicide. And those then, there'll be select plants placed within the wetland system. So there'll be that, and that technique will also be applied to an area of the upland review area. But no equipment needs to be placed within any of those areas. It's particularly the wetland areas that'll work and all be done by hand.
So the question, gentlemen, is do you consider that a significant activity because there is work being done in the wetland? Or would we not?
Does one of the maps show the overlay of where the upland review is that we can actually see? It's so hard because we're so far away from that.
Yeah, you want to get up and look.
Yeah, I can point her out here with the laser pointer, so, or I'll get closer too. So the dark dashed line that you see here, that's the upland, that's the 100-foot upland review line associated with wetland 1. You can see lower on this corner here, same thing as well. It's really on the perimeters of the limit of disturbance associated with the proposed design.
You had another slide that showed the temporary erosion controls.
Yes.
Kind of run your pointer along where those are.
Yeah, so we have two phases really. One is the initial clearing and earthworks we have as phase 1 here. So you can see from the chart here that calls out construction entrances, soil stockpile areas. So the majority of the cleared area would be discharging to the bottom of the page. So this is, temporary sediment basins in 2 locations with diversion swales. And then as we get closer to actually making some improvements, obviously you can see here the building footprint. So that's when things like the silt sacks and some of the more devices associated with the actual pavement and drainage system would go into place. So, but all of those construction entrance, silt sacks, silt fence, all of those things would go in from day 1. And as things get built up, they'd be moved around and changed as the site is developed. So the upland review line, it's hard to see on this as well. Let's see down here, and then along this area as well.
Where's your silt fence?
We have the silt fence along the perimeter of the entire development.
All the way around.
Yeah. Just, I know water flows downhill, but wind can blow uphill, so we always like to just encompass the entire property just to make sure anything within that disturbed area isn't blowing past that line, you know, to the best of our ability.
One thing to point out is that the eastern side of the site is going to be a cut. So the actual development will be at a lower elevation than the wetlands on that side. So there'll still be erosion control measures set up on that eastern side, but water is not going to flow uphill in that area.
And that's a good point. I can point that out to you guys. So there's a retaining wall approximately here where the building is lower. And then there's also a retaining wall on this side as well where the building is higher than the properties to the west.
Can you go back to that color picture you had? The color picture you had? And the retaining wall is going,
Yes, so the retaining wall is at the edge of the green,
okay.
right along on the back of the trailer spaces up here. You can see it here as well. Sorry, this is not as crisp as I imagined it would be. Retaining wall goes here. There's a little bit of a gap, and then it would pick up on this corner as well.
How much of a drop is it on that retaining wall on the top side?
Good question. Give me a second. I can give you the exact number.
Is that a single-story building?
Single story, yep, slab on grade. Approximately 30 feet along the,
There's a 30-foot drop there?
yeah. So to Dean's point, that as that's constructed, it forms a natural barrier during construction and also post-construction. So, you know, vehicles, trash, all that stuff are going to be really contained because of that natural barrier that's going to be constructed for the topography.
You did describe some permanent B&Bs that are going to go in there for stormwater control.
Yeah. So
Is there any outlet from that?
Yeah, so the stormwater management system starts with the catch basins. They have the deep sumps and hoods to get that first flush of trash and sediment that's normal in a commercial parking lot. The water then flows to hydrodynamic separators, which have a chamber that would also pick up anything that gets to the first kind of round of catch basins. And then those are either discharged to subsurface detention systems, a storm trap precast concrete system underneath the parking lot, or an above ground basin, which is the majority of the flow towards Plainfield Pike. So all of those devices do their part to help clean the water and then retain that peak flow. And then we're discharging it in several locations to match the existing drainage patterns that was reviewed by Dean to make sure we weren't drying out a wetland or flooding in a butt or some things of that nature.
Where was the above ground sediment basin?
Yeah, so the above ground basin is roughly right here in the pointer, adjacent to Plainfield Pike, and then the other basins are underneath the parking lot in this area here and this area here. The majority of the topography kind of splits the property roughly here, so anything below this line flows to the bottom of the page, so that's why our systems are here, here, and here.
Where are the discharge?
Let me see if I can. So the discharge points you can see clearly it's here. That's from that underground system. The other one is over here, and then the basin as well, goes towards the road.
And those will discharge into wetland areas through pipes with some kind of...
Yeah, so it's a pipe discharge from the underground system that goes to a preformed scour hole, right, to rip wrap to slow down the velocity so that it can then trickle into the wetlands. Both of the discharges from this underground system and this one here are actually outside the upland review area, so the water that leaves the end of the pipe will then enter the naturally wooded areas in the upland review area and eventually flow into the existing wetlands beyond that.
Yeah, the stormwater system does not discharge directly to any wetland resource areas. All the discharges occur into uplands in a controlled fashion and then eventually make their way into the wetlands.
Anybody else have any questions or any discussion? Now I'll entertain a motion.
Anyone choose to make a favorable motion, I do have one recommended comment. You can see that in your staff report. One recommended condition.
Ryan,
Yes.
the work that was approved before, how much different is this compared to what was there before?
Not very different at all.
Same footprint, well, basically, same amount of disturbance to wetlands,
Well, there is no disturbance to wetlands.
or in the upland review area.
Yes, very, very similar.
Does anybody have an issue with the handwork to enhance the existing wetlands?
I guess we gotta answer the question, is that still considered wetlands disturbance?
In my opinion, it's not, because it is enhancing habitat, getting rid of the invasives. There is minimal soil disturbance associated with it. Would there be any soil disturbance associated, or are you just going to cut it flush with the ground and hit it with an herbicide?
Yeah, for the invasive removal, there's no stumping or root removal, so there's no soil disturbance associated with that activity. The hand plantings, obviously dig a hole, put in the plant, and then mulch it, so that results in minimal disturbance. So, yeah, I would hope the commission would view it as it's intended. It's an enhancement to the wetland habitat, and you know, I would agree with your agent that I wouldn't consider it a disturbance per se. Certainly, it's an activity regulated by this commission, but it's an enhancement to that habitat. So we're improving the resource through that action.
Now, you mentioned a herbicide to prevent, to kill it off. Are we concerned about that being sprayed in the wetlands?
Is it to be sprayed or injected?
So that's a great question. There are herbicides that are specifically allowed by Connecticut DEEP for application in wetland habitats, and we've specified that in our documentation. There are certain adjuncts and additives to certain herbicides that can be toxic to wildlife, particularly fish, amphibians, and whatnot. So we specified the approved herbicide for use. They would be applied either with a low volume sprayer so that there isn't a lot of overspray, or we would actually do a hand applicator using a brush or a sponge. And once you cut the shrubs down to the ground level, you just apply it directly to the cut surface, and that's it. So it has minimal effect on the environment by using special herbicides and using that technique. That methodology is approved by the state and federal government for wetland enhancements. So we're following techniques that are approved by other regulatory agencies for working wetlands.
Without the use of an herbicide, the multiple rows in the autumn hour will take over in a year or so and kill off all the species that were planted.
Yeah, that's correct. It's the best, and if you look, there's an entire committee that deals with invasive species and removal in Connecticut. There's a working group, and the techniques that we're employing follow their recommendations for control of invasives, because just cutting them down isn't going to control them at all. You need to have, and the areas are too large to just kind of do hand pulling. Number one, it creates a lot of soil disturbance trying to rip those plants out, and if you don't get the entire root system, they're just going to come back tenfold within a couple of growing seasons. So the techniques that we're employing are recognized by those regulatory and advisory agencies, and they're the most efficient means of controlling the invasives, remove those, and replace with natives, and give the natives an ability to kind of overtake the understory.
What's historically been the commission's stance on hand work?
It doesn't happen very often, but as has been stated, it's going to be a slash and cut rather than removal of the root systems and then hand planting with a shovel.
Now, there's going to have to be some machine work in that plan review area because you got to build that retaining wall, correct? Is that considered significant?
The wetland advancements.
Yeah, again, another great question. We've proposed in our documentation a post-construction monitoring plan, a 3-year monitoring plan. We've identified performance standards so that we can measure the success of those enhancement areas. And essentially, one of the things that we're looking at is over that 3-year period, make sure that the majority of the plants that were planted survive. Generally, we use a high quantity in smaller stock. It's easier to plant, creates less disturbance, has a higher vitality rate, but you will get some loss. So we plant at a higher density to allow for certain loss, but we do have a percent aerial coverage in our performance standard to be able to sustain those goals. And if for some reason we don't sustain the goals after a period of 3 years, which also includes making sure we have a certain level of control of invasives within that area, those treatment areas. And so if for some reason none of those goals are sustained after 3 years, we'll continue for an additional year until we meet those goals. So we do have set performance standards within the documentation that's been supplied to the commission. But at a minimum, it's going to be a 3-year monitoring program. So they do, yeah, so to be able to classify a vernal pool habitat, there is, although it's not contained in your regulations, there is guidance for a definition standpoint in both the model regulations and Connecticut DEEP, as well as the Federal Army Corps of Engineers. And so you need two components to conclusively determine whether a vernal pool is classified as such and meets the definition. It has some physical attributes. Generally, it's a confined depression, no permanent open water, doesn't have an inlet and outlet, and then you need a biological component. You need breeding activity by at least one obligate vernal pool species. So on this particular property, within all the vernal pools that were identified, we observed breeding by what is considered common vernal pool obligate species, wood frog and spotted salamander. There are rarer species that utilize, that are considered obligate vernal pool species that utilize these habitats, but none of those rarer species like marble salamander were observed. So they're all common, but they are indicators for vernal pools.
So we have that, do we have to do anything about the significant factor, or just put that to that?
It's, you know, I put a condition in the approval that they do not use any machinery in there. I'd be happy. It's all handwork. You're not eliminating wetlands. You're not excavating any.
I'll make a motion to approve with the conditions that the town engineer and wetland agent may require additional erosion and sedimentation control measures based on the site conditions, and that all work for the wetland enhancement be done by hand, no machinery. I guess that's it.
You have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Got a motion, seconded, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries, thank you, gentlemen. Business. Passe. Requesting permission to construct a block retaining wall along the shore of Moose Pond, 207 Pondville Road, assessors map 1, block 115, block 0015.
You are just receiving this for the first time tonight, so no action can be taken. It does require about 500 square foot of wetlands disturbance, so you must decide if this is a significant activity. And if so, there will be additional fees, and a public hearing will have to be held.
Do we have a file number for this?
We do not, because we do not currently have a permitting system.
Okay, I make a motion,
First you have to determine if it's a significant activity.
make a motion that it is a significant activity, and motion that it goes to public hearing.
I'll second that.
Motion been made, seconded, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries, we'll schedule that for the public hearing. Do we have any aids and approvals?
And just for clarity, each pass will be going to public hearing on May 17th.
Citizen participation. Want to say something? Z hearings? Or anybody we need? Last chance. Any correspondence,
No correspondence.
complaints,
Nothing.
other?
Nothing.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.